It's Becca Salamone, and you're watching American Horse Talk Live. And I'm really excited to have a friend of mine that I've recently met through Facebook and just contacting her in general. She is the executive director of the Dude Ranchers Association out in Wyoming, right? Is that correct?
That's
Yeah.
correct.
Yes. And her name is Bryce Albright. Welcome to the show, Bryce. How are you today?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. I'm so excited to have you here. So, you know, dude ranching has had a long history, and we'll get into that in a minute. But one of the things that's happening is in about 3 more years, the Dude Ranchers Association is going to celebrate their 100-year anniversary, which is really special. So that's one of the reasons why I want to get on here and start talking to you and other dude ranch owners about just their ranches in general and their history with their families owning those over the generations, and just really showcase all that we have to offer people in these equine related vacations. So first of all,
Absolutely.
just kind of tell us a little bit about your background. We want to get to know you too, not just about the association. So your background and your horse story.
Yeah, most definitely. So I was actually raised on a dude ranch for most of my younger years in Wyoming, in a small town in Wyoming, and grew up around horses, grew up riding. I mean, we moved a lot, so we never actually had our own. We just we had road friends, and then obviously at the ranch we grew up a horseback out there. But and then when I was a freshman in high school, I went to work for that ranch, and I worked for them for 7 years. And worked every department, everything from I was in housekeeping all the way up to my last 3 years. I wrangled and took rides and rode horses every day, and it was the best job in the world, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then now I'm married and have a little one, and my husband and I raise horses as well, and we team rope and ride, and he cowboys for a living. That's what he does, and I get to go. Sometimes with a new little one, I don't get to go as much as I used to, but the time will come. And then I've been with the association about 5 years now, so I've been working with them, and it's a really great job. I get to work with a lot of different people, and a lot of different disciplines, and just a lot of different areas. So, obviously I miss being on a horse every day. I don't know anybody that doesn't, but it's a pretty good exchange, and especially when I get to go to the ranches and be there, it's pretty awesome. So
That's awesome. Yeah, so that's a pretty good overview, kind of who you are and what you do. So let's really deep dive into the association. Give us a little bit of the historical background and how far they've come from the very beginning till now.
yeah, the Dude Ranchers Association was started in 1926. So, like you were saying, we're almost 100 years old. And so, for a trade association, that's pretty incredible. There's not many that have been able to withstand kind of the test of time. And we've got a lot of branches. Currently, we represent about 90 properties across the Western US and Canada. And, a lot of those ranches have been with us since the beginning. I mean, probably about half of our ranches at least, and that's pretty cool. And that talks a lot to the history of the industry, but also the value of the association and all that we do. And so we went through the Great Depression with these ranches. We went through the financial crisis in '08. We went through COVID. So a lot of them have found a lot of value in what we do as an association. And so looking forward, we hope to be able to continue on our efforts. And we do a lot of different things. Being a trade association, obviously it's all membership based, and all of our ranches do have to apply to be members. It's not a pay to play, and so they all have to meet specific guidelines, requirements. They go through ranch inspections. We do all of that, and so it's a pretty rigorous process. And so that 90 ranches, there's a lot of dude ranches across the country, but to meet DRA standards is pretty incredible. And so having those ranches, we do marketing for them. We act as almost like a travel agent in a sense. We recommend places to people, but we don't collect commissions. We are a dues based association. And then we also, offer a lot of different benefits. So, marketing is our big one, like I said, but we offer, vendors, companies specific that want to work with DRA ranches that offer discounts. We also have, opportunities for our convention. We do an annual event every year where we put on speakers, a trade show, just the opportunity for the ranches to get together. And then also, the force as an industry. We work stronger in numbers, and so we're excited to be able to, offer that up, and especially through COVID and working through, what's going on in the legislature and everything government-wise. It's better that we're able to work together to do that rather than just a couple of ranches trying to do it on their own.
So you answered a lot of my questions there in one thing. So I'm going to slow down a little bit. So I know when we were talking before, you talked about the kind of the development of dude ranching, kind of in alignment with the railroad being developed. Yeah. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so with the association being started in the 1920s, I mean, there was obviously not really airplanes and, the way of travel that we have now. And the railroad was a huge driving force for the West. That's how people came west. And so the Dude Ranchers Association actually worked very closely with Northern Pacific and Burlington Northern and, Union Pacific, and, worked with those railroads to be able to bring people out west. That's where they did a lot of their marketing. If you look back at a lot of Dude Ranch memorabilia, it's all focused around the railroads and how that was used. And so, because Dude Ranches were a big draw, because it wasn't like, traveling now where you could hop on a plane, be there in a day, and then, hop back and go home, and when you took these vacations, these people came for at least a couple weeks at a time, sometimes months, especially for our winter ranches. We had a lot of guests that they wintered at these Dude Ranches. That's what they did. And so, because it was tough to get out west. So yeah, the railroad was very influential in the development of the Dude Ranch industry, and kind of vice versa. The Dude Ranch industry provided a lot of business to the railroad companies at that time.
Okay, cool. So that's really fascinating to me. So you said there's 93 ranches, is that right? 92 or 93?
Currently, we have 91.
91. Okay. All right. So kind of talk about the differences and the different types of ranches that there are, and also kind of including the geography of it, because you're mostly focused in the West, but are there also dude ranches over here in this side of the country in the East?
Yeah, so all of the ranches in the Dude Ranchers Association lie west of the Mississippi River, geographically. That kind of came when they developed the association in the 20s, and when the official bylaws were written later on. The big marketing draw was it was a Western adventure vacation. That was kind of their slogan. And therefore, the board of directors at the time and a lot of the ranchers decided that how could they promote, the original Western adventure vacation if they weren't in the West. There was a big defining factor at that time. It's obviously changed. There are dude ranches in the East, none that obviously are members of our association. We haven't quite got them convinced to change that stipulation yet, but we're working on it. And so, yeah, a lot of our ranches do, all the Western states. So Wyoming, Montana, Colorado are our main states. And then we do have ranches in Arizona, California, Washington, Idaho, and then British Columbia as well. So the different types of ranches, we have about 3 different types is what we talk about. Are kind of more super hands-on experiences that is not necessarily for everyone, but has become a pretty big draw in the last couple of years, is our working cattle ranches. So it's, it is still a vacation, and you still do get to choose what you want to do and whatnot, but it's not necessarily going to be being waited on hand and foot. You're kind of in the thick of it with them. You're helping move cattle. You're helping maybe fix fence one day if you want to. It's a very hands-on experience, and that's been a big draw. Like I said, for a lot of people the last couple of years, we see a lot of international guests attend those ranches as well, because it is a little bit more advanced riding. It's not necessarily just nose to tail for the most part. You have the opportunity to actually be working alongside real cowboys too. And so that do that for a living. Are kind of the majority of our ranches are what we call traditional dude ranches. So the emphasis is very much so on families and horseback riding. So everything from, grandma and grandpa down to the itty bitties. There's something for everybody, kids programs, hiking, fishing, bird watching, obviously horseback riding for all different levels. And you're riding in, very different terrain depending on where you're at. Obviously, if you're in Arizona, Southern California, you're in more of the rolling hills, the desert. They still do get up into the mountains. It's just a little different than like the Rocky Mountains. And then obviously up in Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, the Northwest, you're looking more at obviously big mountains, and valleys, rivers, that kind of stuff. And then, so like I said, the majority of our ranches are what we consider traditional dude ranches. And it's not that a working cattle ranch isn't a traditional ranch. It's just, it was actually started probably as a working ranch that decided to take guests. Traditional dude ranches were mostly formed to be exactly that. They were to be hospitality properties. And then we have our luxury ranches, which are kind of, the 4 or 5-star places that offer a ton of activities and that level of luxury. Usually at those places, you're seeing kind of more gourmet food, pretty high-end accommodations. You're also looking at, services like spas, maybe a little bit more like ATVs, just more advanced, activities that you wouldn't necessarily think you're going to find on a ranch.
Okay. All right. So obviously you're going to have different types of people be attracted to different types of ranches. So do you have those essentially those customer avatars lined out where people, the ranches know who their target market is?
For the most part, yeah. I mean, for the most part, we know that most everybody is dude ranches very much so are a family vacation destination. That's kind of what has developed over the last probably 50 years. But they are very much so vacations for horse enthusiasts, people that are very interested in going and seeing this way of life or have a horse background. And so, those working cattle ranches are going to offer the opportunity to do a little bit more advanced riding or some kind of riding that those guys probably have never got to do before. Maybe get them out of the show jumping ring or, the dressage kind of ring and get them out, living the cowboy lifestyle. And then obviously, yes, our luxury properties, they target a different kind of demographic for sure. But everybody still is, the main focus of these guests is people that want to go, experience the horse, and be around that culture and that atmosphere.
Okay. And so what percentage would you say are complete newbies, never even seen or been on a horse versus people that actually own horses?
Probably people that have never been on a horse, you're probably looking at 65 to 75% of guests.
Wow.
It very much so is people that want just a totally different adventure. They don't want to do Disneyland. They don't want to do a cruise. They want to get their kids or their families or themselves out into nature and experience something totally different. So, the majority of people that come to ranches maybe rode a horse, when they were a kid at a carnival. But for the most part, they have no horse background.
Okay. Well, that's kind of fascinating. So, for the wranglers and the people that have to, take care of the horses and all that kind of stuff, are they looking for those really broke, solid horses, and how are they finding those for those people that are inexperienced?
Absolutely. Bomb proof is definitely a term on dude ranches. And, with the horse market and everything that's happened in the last couple of years, it's been really difficult for dude ranches to find the amount of horses that they need and the level of horses that they need. They have to be very safe. They have to be able to navigate terrain and, have to be able to handle not or having someone on their back that has no idea what they're doing, and so and be able to remain calm, because a lot of these people aren't calm, they're totally out of their element, and so it is very different, and yeah, they are very hard to find. I mean, and it's not necessarily that they're super hard to find; they're hard to find at a reasonable price.
Right.
Dude ranches can't afford to be buying 20 head at $10,000 a piece. It's just not feasible. So that's become a real struggle for the dude ranch industry over the last couple of years.
Yeah. Do you have any kind of, donations of horses or, rescue horses or anything like that to rework them and give them a new life?
A lot of ranches just don't have the time for it. I mean, essentially, they're in the business of making money on putting people on horses for 14 to 15 weeks a year and having seasonal employees. They don't have time to be, having projects or trying to give a horse a chance that they don't know it's going to be a guarantee that it's going to be able to work, So some places do. Some places do have those opportunities, but a lot of them, are really looking for those ready to go, right to the dude string kind of horses.
Okay. And then what's the process of, so let's say a new group of vacationer comes in for the week or 2 weeks. What's the process of assigning a horse to a person?
Every range is different, but for the most part, they all kind of follow the same protocol as they send out pre-intake forms, and people can mark what their experience is, weight limits are very much so present on dude ranches. Most people are pretty willing to work with them, but there is that kind of factor that comes into place. And talking about confidence level on horses, experience, and what type of experience they're looking to have. If they're wanting to advance their skills, if they're wanting to just take a couple easy trail rides, or if they're absolutely terrified of a horse but want to try it, kind of thing. And then it's a very, very personalized experience and very hands-on. And most of the properties, either the night of or the morning after that the guests arrive, either a head wrangler, a barn manager, someone in the kind of higher ups of the ranks goes and talks to all the guests specifically, puts eyes on them, and really gets kind of their story and how, they want to spend their week on a horse. And then they fit from there. And a lot of ranches, they're obviously fitting personality with personality, horses and saddles, and, making sure that it's all a great experience for everyone and every animal, because a horse can be ruined pretty easily if they don't have, a good rider, or if they get in some bad situations or whatever it may be. But
Okay. And does anyone bring their own tack?
some ranches allow people to bring their own horses and tack. As far as own tack goes, they're pretty, strict on that just because of sanitation. And, if somebody gets something in a herd of 100 horses and your horses are out for a week, I mean, that's a big deal,
Yeah.
Having to quarantine any type of animal on a dude ranch, but especially our horses for any reason is detrimental to a business,
Right.
So tack is not, it's pretty rare. And, some ranches will allow it, some ranches, talk through it. But we do have some properties that allow guests to bring their own horses under obviously certain stipulations. But
Okay. Now, talk a little bit about the seasonality of the industry, and when is the best time for people to go on these trips?
if you're looking to take a summer vacation, and you're wanting to go to the mountain states, Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, Idaho, kind of the Northwest, obviously summertime is best. The weather is going to be the best that time of year, usually June to September, is what we say for most of those ranches. Memorial Day to Labor Day is a pretty good guess of what when the ranches are going to be open. But we also do have ranches that do year round. If you're wanting to do kind of the romantic winter, getaway, snowy getaway, we do have a couple northern ranches that allow that, or take guests during that time. And then we've got obviously our southern ranches in Arizona and California that offer a very different experience, during the fall and winter months. And it's all a dude ranch experience. It's just, a little bit more of the Southwestern flair, obviously, but very still cowboy atmosphere. And but you're just more so riding through the desert rather than riding through luscious, green meadows and snow-topped mountains and, that kind of stuff. So
Yeah. So, in excuse me, in the northern located ranches, in the winter, are people actually riding on trail, like snowpack trails, or are they doing other activities?
it depends. Horseback riding is definitely not necessarily the focus activity in the wintertime. A lot of our ranches that are open in the winter do like sleigh rides. And that's kind of the draw with the horses. But more so, you're probably looking at cross-country skiing, snowshoeing, maybe downhill skiing. We do have a couple ranches that are close to downhill ski resorts. And, just kind of a slower pace, and maybe doing more like culinary stuff, or just kind of the different relaxation rather than necessarily being outside, because people probably don't necessarily want to be outside for a super long time, ice skating, that kind of stuff. Some ranches do snowmobiles. We don't have as many anymore, but some ranches do that still.
Okay. And then are there any kind of connections or working relationships, strategic partnerships with the national parks that may be near some of these ranches?
A lot of our ranches, work with the national parks and have concessions to be able to, ride in the parks for the ranches that are around located near these parks. But, obviously, most of them are all privately owned. We do have a couple ranches that lie within park boundaries around the Jackson Hole, Wyoming area, Grand Teton National Park, Yellowstone, that kind of stuff. And so they do have strong relationships with them, but it is still federal. And so it can be a little difficult, when they're working with that. Plus, when you're putting livestock into those, into the national parks and into those ecosystems, there's a lot of stipulations.
Okay. And speaking of Yellowstone, it just kind of popped into my head to ask you this: how has that TV series affected any kind of your vacation statistics?
Well, a lot of people, in the industry will say that was kind of the resurgence, of dude ranches. Honestly, it was kind of like the second round of city slickers. That's how a lot of people say it.
Yeah.
It did provide a great draw to the Western way of life. It really, showcased that. Now the drama behind it also caused some issues for some ranches because, the ranch that they filmed that on, yes, it is a dude ranch, but it's a very, specific kind of ranch. And it really wasn't a dude ranch before they actually filmed there. And so, it's everybody wants to go see that ranch, which is kind of difficult because we actually don't really have many ranches that are very close to it. And they want the Rips and the Casey's, and they want all, and the John Duttons, and there's just not really those type of people. There's not the rough and tough necessarily. That way of life is gone by the wayside. It's we're definitely living in a different era. So there's definitely been some managing of expectations when it comes to that, which is a little difficult. But it really did kickstart a lot for the dude ranch industry, kind of relit the fire. And COVID did the same thing, honestly. Where a lot of the travel industry suffered through COVID, dude ranches actually thrived. It was an outdoor vacation. They were driving distance. It was the opportunity to be, a different experience with their kids and families and whatnot. And so, it really was a positive in most cases.
Yeah, that was actually my next question. So glad you answered that one. Yeah, so getting out to the great outdoors, is that kind of one of the themes that people are marketing around, and just returning back to nature and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think that's definitely been a slogan, especially since COVID. But it's definitely, dude ranches have been doing that for years, obviously. But yeah, I mean, people kind of started paying more attention to it in the last couple of years.
Yeah, and then kind of going back to the more famous connections too. I told you when we talked before that I've been watching the videos that Debbie Dunning had made about dude ranches.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that, because that's kind of a neat way to showcase all that everybody has to offer.
Yeah, Debbie Dunning did a great job. She did 3 seasons of what she called Debbie Dunning's Dude Ranch Roundup, and it was where she went and experienced these properties. She was hands-on, and she was acting kind of as like a guest on these, just showcasing what these ranches did. And each ranch is different. We do not have a single ranch out there that's identical. And so she really, highlighted the differences, and she did a lot of different properties throughout there. Not all of them were Dude Ranchers Association members, but a good portion of them were. And she really brought a great light to the properties as well. And those airing on RFD TV and the Cowboy Channel, that was all really, a great showcase of dude ranches. And it was a great opportunity at the time. It's unfortunate that they're not doing it anymore, but they really did a great job in showcasing how the properties were different, and really bringing to light that, like, this is not just, sleeping in a bunkhouse and, riding for 12 hours a day and working harder than being on vacation, and
Right.
they showcased that it was something for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, yeah, that they were kind of interesting to me, and I think I watched all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk a little bit also about the family and community connection, and maybe generational travel. Are you seeing lots of people come with 2 or 3 generations in their
Yeah, so
travel group?
generational travel is a really big deal with dude ranches because uh, a lot of dude ranches probably have one of the highest return clientele rates in the travel industry. Because there's a romance to it. Grandpa came when he was a kid, or he came when it was a boys' camp, not even a dude ranch yet. And then he wanted to bring his children, and then now the grandchildren, and then the great grandchildren, And so multi-generational family reunions are a big market for dude ranches for sure. And then you're also seeing these dude ranches. You're very much just seeing them being run by generations. For the most part, our ranches are family owned and operated. It has changed a little bit in the last couple of years as families don't have people to pass it down to, so they're selling or something like that. But for the most part, the ranches next generations are taking over. Their generations further are being raised on the ranches, and that really provides a very special atmosphere that's very different from a lot of the hospitality and lodging industry.
Yeah, definitely. Now, originally there were over 120 different dude ranches in existence, right?
It's varied. At one time, there was 140 in the association. There's been as little as 50. It just over 100 years. It's really, it rises and falls for sure.
Okay, and so it's not necessarily a downward trend to be in the 90s because it will go up and down.
Yeah, when I started with the DRA, we had 107 ranches, but and also the first year we lost 7 but gained another 5. It really fluctuates, and a lot of that comes with too, ranches selling, people not wanting to do the dude ranch side of it anymore, or new ranches being started, which doesn't happen a ton. But there's been a lot of properties that have sold, in the last couple of years. Ranching is not an easy way of life, and it is not where you're going to make a million. It's weather, people, livestock, horse, and markets, everything. It changes so significantly that a lot of people don't even want to deal with it anymore, which is sad, but it's the truth. It's a lot of work. So
yeah. Well, it really has to be that special lifestyle that keeps people there. And so, talk a little bit about that. The cowboy lifestyle and the cowboy code, and the morals, the values that are involved in that.
Yeah, I mean, the cowboy lifestyle, it's like I said, it's romanticized. It's a very romantic thought, but it's hard work. It's not for the faint of heart, and that's why you've seen it really kind of taper off. People don't cowboy for a living anymore because one, the cost of living is really difficult. The price of land, all of that is changed so much. We don't live in the economy that we used to, but it's also it's not easy. It's not easy keeping your horses legged up and stocked up, and the cattle market, that's all over the place, so there's no real consistency with ranching, and it takes a very special kind of person and, family dynamic and just, company to be able to continue on with ranches in the current economy. But, there is the people that are sustaining, and for sure. And, with our ranches, it's very much so, rises and falls. It's seasonal, so they take their guests, and then in the wintertime, they focus on the properties and making sure they're upkept, and, the maintenance that's required, and then taking care of the livestock, and there is very much so, the cowboy code, and that's different for everybody, but it translates over to dude ranches for sure. This is still the cowboy lifestyle, the Western way of life, and, it's a handshake still is, a contract in a lot of places. And so, it all depends on what type of group you're dealing with, but they're pretty, tenacious people, and very able to kind of ride through the times. I mean, if anything's proven that in 100 years, they're very durable for sure.
Yeah. So, have you heard anything specific from any of the owners about why they stay in it when it is a little bit difficult?
Oh, I think it just goes back to the people. That's the difference with dude ranches compared to regular ranches is you have the opportunity to change a life on a dude ranch.
Yes.
I think we all know horses have that opportunity and have that ability, but to be able to really immerse these people in an experience that they probably will never have again in their lifetime, and unless they come back, and really have the opportunity to make a difference. That's why people do it. They do it to see the grandkids and the great grandkids come with grandma and grandpa. They do it to, see their families still be raised in that atmosphere, and to really, change the lives of not just guests, but also their staff, being able personally to say that, working dude ranches, like I would not be where I am if it were not for the 7 summers I spent, working a ranch. So.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk a little bit about the storefront for the association, where that's located, and isn't there a museum inside there?
Yeah, so we are headquartered in Cody, Wyoming. Very western little town and a big tourist location. And so we do have a building there. It's owned by our Dude Ranch Foundation, which is our 501c3 nonprofit arm of the association. And yeah, the building was bought in the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's been our home for over 20 years now. And yeah, so our offices are in that building. And then we have also, yes, the front part of it is a museum. So it's a lot of Dude Ranch memorabilia. It's a big part of the foundation's mission to carry on the history and preserve all that has gone into this industry in so many years. And so it's a cool little museum and it's free. We're open in the summertime, it's open every day. And then in the wintertime, it's open 3 days a week. So
Awesome. I would love to go to that.
yeah,
Fly
it's
out there,
pretty
just go to
cool.
the museum.
That's right.
So, talk a little bit more about the foundation and why that was established and what it does.
Yeah, so the Dude Ranch Foundation actually started as an educational trust board. In 1988, they formed the educational trust to do scholarships for these Dude Ranch kids to go to college and to make sure that they were supporting education in terms that would still turn these kids back to Dude Ranches and to help grow the industry. Veterinarians, business degrees, hospitality, whatever it may have been. It was a big deal, for the foundation and the founders at that time to invest in these kids' education. And so then it was in around 2017 they changed the name over to the Dude Ranch Foundation, and it became the full. They started focusing more on not just scholarships. That's still a very big part of what they do, but they focus on horse safety programs, developing programs that are going to help continue on the conservation of the land on which Dude Ranches reside, the history, the horse industry, and the industry as a whole. The foundation has a huge impact on what the association does. And, they offer a lot of great resources to our members in terms of, like I said, horse safety programs, wrangler training programs, these scholarships for these kids that work on Dude Ranches. And then also, now their wildfires has become a big thing for Dude Ranches. It's affecting everyone across the nation, but it really does affect where these ranches lie. And so they're currently working on a wildfire mitigation program. So they do a ton. And then they also have a huge educational aspect outside of the scholarships, in informing people of the Dude Ranch industry and promoting that as well. So they do a great job too and working hand in hand with us on that.
Okay, so but you're not the executive director of that.
I'm not. No, they have a specific director.
Okay, awesome. But you're in the same location.
Correct. But I work remotely, but I'm in the office. And my assistant works in the office, and then the executive director for the foundation is hybrid. She works
Okay,
remotely, and then in the office, usually in the summertime.
okay, all right. So I think you mentioned something about international vacationers, travelers. So what percentage of people are coming over from well anywhere in the world to do this, and
Well, it's
why
changed,
do you
obviously.
go ahead?
Yeah, a lot. I mean, it used to, we used to have a pretty big draw. Probably 25% of ranches, had an international influence of some kind. Obviously, COVID put the kibosh on that for many years, but we are seeing the draw come back. We see it more with our winter ranches. A lot of them do want to come in the summertime and experience it, but they usually like to see the shoulder seasons or the winter seasons just because usually you see a price difference at that time. And we have found that that tends to be kind of correlates with international guests. But also, there is very much so a very big draw to the Western way of life in the European countries, especially.
Yes. Well, I was about to say, I've studied French my entire life, and I've always known that they are really into the cowboy, and that type
Yes.
of lifestyle. So, do you get a lot of people from France?
Yeah, so France, Germany, the United Kingdom, obviously. Those are probably our three biggest states. We do see a pretty heavy influence in like Switzerland, the Netherlands, but France, Germany, and the UK are always three of our top ones when we do have international guests coming.
That's great. So these people come into these ranches, especially some of the larger ones that can accommodate more guests at one time. Are they commingling and getting to know each other and developing community while they're there? Do they keep in touch with each other, or how's that work?
Oh, absolutely. That's a huge part of Dude Ranches is the atmosphere, and building the relationships. And because you are all inhabited on the same place for usually a week, you're going to run into these people multiple times in the dining room, on rides, however it may be. And so, yeah, there's very much so a community aspect and the relationship building. And and a lot of Dude Ranchers will tell you that's where the magic happens. That's the magic they see throughout the week. So.
Yeah, so no, when people go horse camping, the day normally is like you get up in the morning, you're feeding your horse, you're getting your breakfast and everything, you're getting ready to go ride, you come back, you put your horse up and all that, and then at night you get your bath, you might go line dance and have your beef stew over the campfire, whatever. Is it the same type of routine in horse camping, and is there lots of activities like around the campfire and line dancing and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, usually most ranches have a nightly activity of some kind, whether it's, a local rodeo or, a campfire or evening entertainment, music, cookouts, whatever that might be. So yeah, there's very much so. A lot of our ranches have a pretty general structured program of, rides are offered at these times, this is going to happen, meals are at these times. But there is still very much of the autonomy that guests have to choose what they want to do.
Okay. And then I've got a couple more questions and I'll let you go because I think I hear maybe some kids in the background. So do you have, or can you talk about some of the more famous ranches?
Yeah, there's really not many that I would say are necessarily famous. There's very much so the one that gets highlighted a lot is the Eaton's Dude Ranch because it's the oldest Dude Ranch. It is said to be the very first ranch that was developed. It was actually originally started in North Dakota, but the Eaton's brothers that started that ranch actually picked it up after a pretty terrible winter one year and moved it over to where it currently resides, which is in Wolf, Wyoming, which is outside of Sheridan. So kind of very much so in that northwest corner. And so, that's that one's highlighted a lot because of its history for sure. And then, you've got some of the ranches that that get highlighted a lot that actually aren't members of ours are the big fancy properties, the resorts, which are more so like the Ranger, Romp Creek, Paws Up Dude Ranch, Rush Creek Ranch, so those are all very, well-known ranches, but a lot of it's because of, their 5-star ratings and there's a lot of marketing dollars behind those. But, there's not necessarily any that are super famous in our association. They're all very well represented and very well marketed. And so you don't have to look very hard to find, ranches that are doing a good job of marketing themselves.
Yeah. So that was one of my questions is, how involved is this industry with the travel agent and advisor industry, and do you feel like those people have those resources that they need to bring people there, or does everyone find themselves marketing themselves?
They very much so market themselves, but like I said earlier, Dude Ranches have a really high return rate for clientele. So they're not like a hotel where they're having to sell and sell and sell and sell. These people, once you get the client, 90% of the time they're going to come back sometime. It might not be the next year. It may be 5 years down the road. It's there's a special, connection with Dude Ranch guests for sure. And as far as working with travel agents, a lot of them do to an extent. There was a period in time there, like right when I started, Dude Ranches were thriving pretty well and they didn't need essentially. COVID changed a lot of that because a lot of people weren't willing to travel without booking it through a travel agent just to make sure, they had the right travel insurance, flights were covered, all of that, just because everything was so variant to change.
Right.
And so there was a lot of travel agents, and now we've seen a way big surge back of them still. It's still carrying 2 years later that Dude Ranches or, the guests are wanting to work with travel agents. So, but we do tell everybody, that most ranches are willing to work with travel agents. They have to talk to them directly. about that. We don't keep in-house of who works with them and who doesn't and what they pay commissions on. But for the most part, the travel agents have the resources they need through us and then also through working with the ranches.
Okay, awesome. One more question. What does it mean to you? I ask people this all the time. What does it mean to you to be an American?
That's an easy question, but it's a hard question.
I know. It's kind of tricky, isn't it?
Proud of your country and being a contributing member to society and, actually having morals and, integrity, doing what you say you're going to do and being proud of where you live and proud of the lifestyle you can create. Really just doing whatever you can to improve this world that we have. It's gone astray for sure. And every little bit helps. So any way you can contribute back to that, whether it's through the horse or, it's through just whatever you're doing within your community. It's very important to be involved. You can't sit back and watch it happen because that's just happened too much the last couple of years. So
there you go. All right. Well, thank you so much, Bryce, for joining me today and sharing your horse story and that of the Dude Ranchers Association. I really appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having us, and we look forward to staying in touch.
Yes. And we'll need to do an update when we get closer to the 100-year mark.
That's right. We will.
Yeah. Maybe before then.
That's right.
All right. So you can go get more information at duderanch.org and also duderanchfoundation.org. Is that right? I'm showing these banners. Okay. Yep. Anywhere else you want to share or anything that you want to let people know about before we go?
You can find us on social media, of course, but it's still going to probably direct you back to the website. And we're pretty hands-on. There's only 2 of us here in the office, so you're going to get a real person, and we're going to help, whatever we can do to get people to Dude Ranches or answer any questions they might have.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And guys, make sure that you follow American Horse Talk and on Facebook and learn when we go live and share these stories. And also, also follow them at the Dude Ranchers Association on Facebook. Thanks so much. Yes. All right. I'll talk to you soon, Bryce. Thank you. Bye-bye.
See ya.